Mr. Speaker, when Owen Paterson was on the ropes, the Prime Minister was prepared to rip up the entire rulebook to save his jobs. P&O workers want him to show the same fight in relation to them. The government had advance warning of these mass sackings. A memo was sent to the Transport Secretary and to the Prime Minister's office, but they didn't lift a finger to stop them. Did the Prime Minister not understand the memo, or did he just not bother to read it?
Prime Minister.
I think what the right honourable gentleman needs to rip up, Mr. Speaker, is his pre-scripted questions, because I've just answered the question, and the point at issue, Mr. Speaker, is whether or not the government was properly notified, and it's not about what happens the previous evening. I knew about it on the Thursday it became public, but the company concerned has a duty to notify the government 45 days, Mr. Speaker, before they take action of that kind. That is why we're taking the action that we are to protect hard-working people, and what we're also doing, by the way, Mr. Speaker, this month is lifting the living wage for all workers across our country by another £1,000, so it's up £5,000 since 2015.
Keir Starmer.
I think the Prime Minister just said he knew about it on the day.
Yeah.
I take it from that answer the Prime Minister didn't read his WhatsApp briefing.
Surely not.
Let's test his rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, since the Prime Minister came to office, P&O have received over £38 million of government contracts. And the parent company, DP World, is lined up for £50 million of taxpayers' money under the Freeport scheme. The government is apparently reviewing these contracts, but reviews don't save jobs. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that these companies will not get a penny more of taxpayers' money or a single tax break until they reinstate the workforce?
Mr. Speaker, I think what the House has already heard is that we are taking legal action against the company concerned under the 1992 Employment and Trades Union and Labour Relation Act, and that is the right thing to do, because it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that they have broken the law. But if he's asking this government to do what Labour usually want us to do and actively pitchfork away investment around the country from overseas, Mr. Speaker, then that is not what we will do. We'll take them to court, we'll defend the rights of British workers. What we will not do, Mr. Speaker, is launch a wholehearted campaign, as they would want, against overseas investment, because that is completely wrong, and wrong for those workers, Mr. Speaker.
Well, DP World must be quaking in their boots. The Prime Minister says how disappointed he is in them, whilst handing them £50 million. Prime Minister said about the law, speaking of hollow reviews, as the law stands, it's not illegal to pay seafarers below the national minimum wage, right, even if they're working out of UK ports and in UK waters. 2 years ago, Prime Minister, his government admitted that that was unjustifiable 2 years ago, and promised 2 years ago, you've guessed it, to review it. 2 years on, despite what he says today, nothing's been done, leaving the gate wide open for P&O. British workers don't need another empty review, they need action. So when will the Prime Minister fix that gap in the law?
Mr. Speaker, with great humility, I must ask the right honourable gentleman to listen to the answer that I gave to the first question, because it would then help him to scrap his third or fourth question and try another one. We are going to address the defects in the 1998 Living Wage Act, Minimum Wage Act, and make sure that everybody serving in the UK exclusive economic zone, working in the UK exclusive economic zone, gets paid the living wage as people do in the rest of the country.
Keir Starmer.
The problem is that's what he said 2 years ago. It didn't happen, and P&O took advantage of the gap left wide open by this Prime Minister.
Yes.
P&O's behaviour comes off the back of a string of fire and rehire cases. Profitable companies threatening to fire workers unless they accept a pay cut. The Prime Minister keeps telling us just how opposed he is to fire and rehire. But as we saw on Monday, Mr. Speaker, as we saw on Monday, he doesn't have the backbone to ban it. Whilst he sits on his hands, more and more workers are having their lives thrown upside down by this appalling practice. What good to them is a Prime Minister who's all mouth and no trousers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the most notable practitioners of fire and rehire are, of course, the Labour Party themselves. He may be interested. He may be interested to know we will be vindicating the rights of British workers, UK employees under UK law. But the law that the P&O, the company themselves, are allegedly relying on was introduced, I can tell him, as a result of EU directives. Never forget, Mr. Speaker, and he may not like it, that's the reality. He would have kept us unable to change it, unable to get out of it. He would have made it impossible for us to protect UK employees in the way that we're going to do. But what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, above all, is ensuring that workers in this country have the best protection of all, which is a job, Mr. Speaker. And under this government, thanks to the steps that we have taken, thanks to the stewardship of the economy by my right honourable friend, which you'll be hearing about in a little bit more, Mr. Speaker, we have people in payroll employment, 600,000 more of them than before the pandemic began.
Keir Starmer.
He can complain all he likes, but on Monday, he ordered all of his lot to abstain on a vote to ban fire and rehire. Exactly. And they all did. And then, Mr. Speaker, to add insult to injury, after the vote, his party posted a message saying that, where possible, they will look to find P&O workers new jobs. Pathetic. They don't want new jobs. They want their old jobs back. They don't want a Prime Minister hoisting the white flag. They want him to fight for their livelihoods. 82,000 seafarers in this country. I've spoken to dockers, engineers, deckhands and sailors. They're all worried about what this means for them. This morning, one of them said to me, if P&O can get away with this, other companies will get rid of us too and replace us with cheap labour from abroad. Why does the Prime Minister think that they will take a crumb of comfort from his half-assed bluster and waffle today?
Mr. Speaker, P&O plainly aren't going to get away with it any more than any other company that treats its employees in that scandalous way, Mr. Speaker. And this is a historic moment for this country, actually, because it's now 2 years since 2 years to the day that we went into lockdown. And that plunged this country into the biggest, deepest loss of output that we've seen in our lifetimes. And thanks to the Chancellor, who protected the economy, who protected jobs, who protected companies, we've now been able to come out faster and more effectively than any other comparable economy. We have unemployment back down to 3.9%. We have 600,000 more people on the payroll, Mr. Speaker. And the best assurance we can give workers around the country is that the economy is now bigger than it was before the pandemic began. And we will continue to get the big calls right, as we got the big calls right during the pandemic. They got the big calls wrong. They would do absolutely nothing to protect workers, let alone P&O workers, Mr. Speaker, because not only would they have kept us in lockdown and kept those ships in port, Mr. Speaker, unable to move, that's the reality, kept those ships in port, but, Mr. Speaker, there has never been a Labour government that left office with unemployment lower than when they began.